Hello and welcome. My name is Natty Cash, and we are back with some more Champions League predictions. My last round of predictions, I didn't make a video. There's a post on the YouTube channel about that because at that point I was still pretty sick. So as you can see, I did decently well. I got 10 correct out of the 18. Sitting at about 500 for my predictions, which is not bad, especially when you've got wins, draws, and losses. I did get a couple right. The exact scores where I had AC Milan beating Club Brugge 3-1 and Aston Villa beating Bologna 2-0. So we'll see if I can kind of do that or better and kind of improve as we go along. I think it'll be really interesting to see now. There's still a lot of movement that I think is going to happen in the overall table, especially because there's a lot of teams that maybe have had a tougher schedule to start, some that will have a little bit of an easier schedule to start, and we'll see how that balances out. So the first matchup we have here is PSV Eindhoven versus Girona. And now looking at Girona, if Girona wants to have an opportunity to get into the playoffs, I think they have to get some kind of result here. They're looking at the rest of their schedule. Liverpool, Arsenal, AC Milan are going to be hard to get points from. They can get a win against Sturm Graz, but I don't think 6 points in total is going to get them across the board and into the playoffs. So getting a result here is important for them. But they also have dealt with their own struggles in La Liga as well, sitting only kind of a little bit off of mid-table. So we'll see how that goes. With PSV Eindhoven, they're at the top of the Eredivisie. They've had some decent results, actually, when you look at how well Sporting have done, and they got a draw there, how well PSG is, and they get a draw there. So really, when I look at this, PSV, where they need a push is now start getting wins on the board. And I think this would be a great opportunity at home against Girona that maybe isn't as strong as they were last year, struggling a little bit in their own domestic league. So I think with the home advantage here, I do give PSV Eindhoven the win here. It could be closer than what we initially note here, but I'm going to give maybe a 2-1 victory for Eindhoven in this matchup. Next, we have Slovan Bratislava hosting Dinamo Zagreb. This, when I look at an opportunity for Bratislava to get a point, would be this matchup. I've looked at this matchup and say there's a chance that they could get a draw here. Now, Dinamo Zagreb had a struggling start. However, then a win against Red Bull Salzburg and then getting a draw against Monaco is actually, I think, put Dinamo Zagreb with an outside chance to get into the playoffs, depending on how this matchup goes. If they can get a win here, they could push their way into the playoffs. They'd already have 7 points on the board. They have another matchup against Celtic. If they could get more points there, they could confirm their spot in a playoffs, in my prediction. So I do think Zagreb is the better team here. It just depends on, is Bratislava going to looking at this game as an opportunity to get points, or is Zagreb being able to take a away matchup here and get the 3 points? I think I am going to give Zagreb the points here. Maybe it's going to be kind of back and forth, high scoring. I think Slovan Bratislava is going to try to target this game as to be their game to get points on the board at the European football stage. But I do see Zagreb getting the victory here, which will put them very nicely in the playoff conversation. Maybe just on the bottom of the playoffs, but we'll be pushing in that direction after a win here. Next, we have Dortmund hosting Sturm Graz. The Austrian league winners last year, and still kind of in the driver's seat in that league, unlike Red Bull Salzburg that's been there for a number of years. Sturm Graz is still doing well in their league, but it hasn't translated to any of the matchups that we've seen. Losses against Brestois, Club Brugge, and Sporting Club. have made it difficult. And I think it's going to be difficult for Sturm Graz to get any points in their remaining games. Maybe you look at Lille or Girona as teams that could slip up and Sturm Graz could get points, but I'm having a tough time seeing them play here. And this is Sturm Graz's first matchup against a Pot 1 team, and I don't think it's going to go well. Dortmund has done decently, although they've had kind of their ups and downs so far in the Bundesliga. They got solid wins against Club Brugge and Celtic. They did lose to Real Madrid in that Champions League final rematch, but I think Dortmund's going to bounce back here. I think it'll be pretty convincing. I'm going to go for maybe a 4-0 win for Dortmund here. Anything other than that, anything that's close would be considered a surprise, I think, in this matchup. Next, we have Liverpool playing Leverkusen. This is a interesting matchup. There is a chance perhaps that Xabi Alonso was potentially going to be a head coach at Liverpool, but he's decided to stay at Leverkusen. But Arne Slot has done an excellent job for Liverpool, putting them first. I think they're still first in the Premier League. They've looked really sharp, and on top of that, they are one of the few teams so far in the Champions League that have yet to drop any points, getting wins against Leipzig, AC Milan, and Bologna. And so this matchup, I think, is really interesting because Leverkusen has done well enough as well, beating AC Milan, Feyenoord. They did drop points in it recently in their draw against Brestois, but Leverkusen, I think, are still a quality team. They're still pushing at the top of the Bundesliga. I do see Liverpool getting the win here. Just they've been solid all year, and I don't think that's going to change. It is going to be a close one, I think. So I'm going to give maybe another 2-1 win. Liverpool can pull this one out and get a solid win, continuing their undefeated record in the Champions League this year. Next up, we have Real Madrid hosting AC Milan. And Real Madrid, again, as usual, they're sitting towards the top of the Champions League. They're sitting towards the top of La Liga, and actually maybe our top. I forgot to check on that one. But they're doing solid. They did lose against Lille, but bounced back well to get a solid win against Borussia Dortmund. Continuing kind of their projection to probably be one of the 8 teams to move directly to the quarterfinals. But again, you still have to play your games, and this is a game I would think Real Madrid would probably end up winning. Now, AC Milan is interesting. They've only got 3 points on the board, but they've had a tough schedule where their 3 games they've played so far have been either Pot 1 or Pot 2. So even if they don't do well here, and it might look like, they're struggling, they are probably going to push their way up the table against some of the teams that are later on in their schedule. Red Star Belgrade, Dinamo Zagreb, Girona, and Slovan Bratislava all are winnable games for AC Milan. This one I just don't think is. And I am going to give AC Milan maybe a 3-1 victory here. Real Madrid a 3-1 victory. They're going to continue to put points on the board. AC Milan and your fans, the time's coming. They've gotten down all of their tough matchups. They're going to then go on a run, I think, here in the rest of this Champions League schedule. Next, we have Celtic hosting RB Leipzig. Celtic have had a decent showing so far. Their one home game that they have had was a good win against Slovan Bratislava, but getting a nice away draw against Atalanta only helps their potential campaign to make the playoffs. This one's an interesting one because I do think Celtic are going to be a good team at home. It's going to be tough to go and travel to them. And Leipzig have not gained any points so far in Champions League. But they're another one of those teams that all of their matchups so far have been against the Pot 1 or Pot 2 teams. So looking at Sporting, Celtic, Sturm Graz are opportunities for Leipzig to get points. If Leipzig drops points here or maybe even loses, it's going to be difficult for Leipzig to then push ahead and feel like they could make the playoffs here. They might be one of the surprise teams not to make the playoffs, despite how common they've been at the Champions League level. This one's a tough one. I think I'm going to go for... I think I'm going to say that Leipzig is going to win here, but I think it's going to be tight. I would not be surprised if Celtic get a win. And I hope they do from the cheering from an underdog standpoint, but I really do think Leipzig have enough in them. All of their matchups that they played against Liverpool, Juventus, and Atletico Madrid is that they're all very close. So I think they should have enough to get it over the line here, but it is always tough to travel out to Glasgow for that one. So yeah, we'll see about that, but I think Leipzig will get the win. Next, we have Lille hosting Juventus. Lille has made some surprises, at least from what I would see. Getting wins against Real Madrid and Atletico Madrid so far has actually been a really big surprise. They did lose to Sporting Club, but it'll be interesting to see what that looks like moving forward. They've set themselves up well to be into the playoff picture. We'll see what they do against Juventus here. Juventus have had a couple good wins. They did lose to Stuttgart, but 2 wins on the board. I initially would look at a game like this and say, Juventus is probably the better side. They've done better in the league, but in Serie A. But I think this could be an even matchup. I'm actually going to give this a draw, and maybe like a 1-1 draw is what I will do here. So 1-1 draw for Lille and Juventus. Next, we have Sporting Club de Portugal up against Man City. Sporting Club has done decently well so far, 2 wins and a draw. I will say, though, one is that they have played the lower end of their schedule, so only pot 3 or 4 teams, and losing their manager now to Manchester United. It'll be interesting to see what Sporting can do moving forward at the Champions League level. This is a hard matchup regardless if they lose their manager or not. Man City with Pep Guardiola is always going to be a tough matchup, and I do think Man City are going to take the win here. It was interesting they did drop points with the draw to Inter Milan, but solid wins against Sparta Prague and Slovan Bratislava are kind of expected. This one could be tighter than we would anticipate, but I am going to give maybe a 3-1 victory for Man City here. I think they have enough to take the team on. Maybe Gyökeres can get another goal tally for the season for him, but that I would see Man City with the win here. Next, we have Bologna at home against AS Monaco. Monaco have had a solid start to their year, not only in Ligue 1, but getting a solid win against Barcelona, and that surprised me at least, and getting the wins they need against Red Star Belgrade. They did drop points in drawing to Dinamo Zagreb in Champions League, but I think Monaco are a solid team here. Bologna, on the other hand, maybe have struggled a little bit more, losing to Liverpool and Aston Villa, getting a reasonably solid draw against Shaktar, but I do see Bologna struggling. I don't know if they're going to have enough to push their way into the playoffs. However, if they could get a win here, that certainly could turn their fortunes around. Monaco, on the other hand, I think are going to just be building on their campaign. If they can get another win, maybe even a couple draws or so, I think they'll be pretty firmly in the playoff picture, and then you never know what the matchups are going to bring. So I'm going to say AS Monaco here is the better side. Maybe a closer win. I know I've predicted this a couple times, but AS Monaco, I think, with a slight 2-1 victory over Bologna. Then we have Club Brugge hosting Aston Villa. Club Brugge, I predicted one of their matchups correctly against AC Milan, and also lost to Dortmund, but got a win on the board with Sturm Graz so far. They're pushing towards the top of the Belgian Pro League, and so I don't think there's any issues there. They can still be a quality team. I think this matchup, though, against Aston Villa is pretty tough. Surprisingly, Aston Villa as a pot 4 team, and of course we knew going in, Aston Villa sitting in pot 4 is maybe not as accurate of how good of a team this could be under Unai Emery, but winning against Bayern Munich, that was a surprise. And having now 3 wins on the board, being one of the 2 teams with a perfect record so far, is crazy to see. And I actually don't think that's going to change. I think Aston Villa can keep going in here and getting results. I know they've dropped some points in the Premier League, but I think when you look at what they can do here, they have an opportunity that they can solidify their position and push towards even maybe a automatic bid to the quarterfinals for the Champions League. The round of 16. So with that in mind, I do think Aston Villa is going to take this pretty handily. I'm actually going to maybe go for a pretty large score, a 3-0 win for Aston Villa. If Club Brugge wants to push themselves into the playoff picture, they're going to have to get results against Sporting Club or Celtic or both if they want to make sure they can progress in this tournament. So I'm going to go with Aston Villa in this one. Next, we have Shaktar Donetsk up against Young Boys from Switzerland. Both of these teams are looking for a positive push in their Champions League form. Only one draw from Shaktar after losses to Atalanta and Arsenal, and Young Boys with 3 losses, but against fairly tough teams, right? Inter, Barcelona, Aston Villa. So this one I think could be interesting. I think Shaktar might have the edge just from home field advantage, but I do think the young boys are a solid team, and they've just had a really tough start to their schedule, right? Having to play some solid teams. So I could go any direction here, and maybe the scenario tells me that means it's going to be a draw. Shaktar and Young Boys drawing here. I think for both of these teams, they want to get 3 points because that 3 points would be a big boost for them if they want to progress in this competition. However, I think they're probably going to cancel each other out, and that's probably detrimental for both of them, as I don't know if either team is going to get enough points to make it into the playoff round. But I'm going to go for a draw between Shaktar and Young Boys. Next, we have Bayern Munich hosting Benfica. Bayern Munich has dropped a couple games in the Champions League, which is very much unlike them based on their record they've had in the group phase for a number of years. But losses against Barcelona and Aston Villa means that they only got 3 points on the board so far, where Benfica, after a good win, they have a good win against Atletico Madrid. They did lose to Feyenoord, but winning against Red Star Belgrade is to their benefit. I do see Bayern Munich winning this game, especially at home. I think Benfica's opportunities maybe against Bologna and Monaco to get more points on the board. If they can get one more win, they will certainly be sitting nice in the playoffs. But I don't think the win's going to come here. I think Bayern Munich are going to take this one, and maybe something like a 2-0 victory I think is reasonable. 2-0 victory for Bayern Munich. Next, we have Inter Milan hosting Arsenal. Both quality teams that I see here. Inter Milan getting a nice draw against Man City and has solid victories against Red Star Belgrade and Young Boys. Arsenal are an interesting one because they're one of the teams that have not ran into any of their pot 3 or pot 4 matchups. However, they haven't lost a game either. The draw against Atalanta and wins against PSV and Shaktar have set them up nicely so far in the Champions League. And I think this one, it could be a pretty evenly matched game. I'm going to go for, and it may be a little bit of a boring scenario, maybe a 0-0 draw here. I think both of these teams are solid teams. I think Arsenal is going to refocus themselves from dropping points in the league to then get a reasonable result as a draw here away from home against Inter. So a draw between Inter and Arsenal. Next, we have Paris Saint-Germain up against Atletico Madrid. Two teams that have been good in the Champions League, but maybe have been a little bit more disappointing so far. Atletico Madrid does have a win against Leipzig, but losing to Benfica and Lille kind of puts them behind a little bit. There's lots of opportunities for them to get more wins, but they need to start doing that quicker or sooner rather than later. And PSG is kind of in a similar scenario. They've got a win against Girona, but they drew against PSV Eindhoven and lost to Arsenal. And it's hard for me to then see, okay, well, is PSG going to be towards the top of the Champions League table? I don't think so based on some of their remaining games. So, and this is one of them where it's tough to see PSG actually getting points from this. Now, there is the benefit that they're not going away to Atletico Madrid. Otherwise, I would probably favor them a fair bit. But I do see Atletico Madrid probably getting the win here. I'm going to give it, maybe like just a 1-0 victory. I don't think there's much between them, and I think maybe a late-minute winner from Atletico will be enough for them to get 3 points in their Champions League pursuit. Next, we have Feyenoord hosting RB Salzburg. Feyenoord are doing decently well without Arne Slot as their manager this year, and getting solid wins against Girona and Benfica have meant that they have a legitimate opportunity to get into the playoffs and see what they can do from there. Red Bull Salzburg, I think, it's just kind of the opposite of that. They've lost 3. All of their games so far have been against pot 3 or 4 teams, so they haven't even hit the tough part of their schedule yet. And playing Feyenoord is the last opportunity for them to maybe get points, as they have to play PSG, Real Madrid, Atletico Madrid, and Bayer Leverkusen. I think RB Salzburg is going to be one, if not more than one of the teams, that will finish this Champions League round with 0 points on the board. They're struggling in their own league, sitting kind of third, a little bit off of where they normally are, and I think it's showing that their quality in their own domestic league there's no quality here on the Champions League stage either. So I do think Feyenoord are going to take this fairly easily. I'm going to say maybe let's go a 2-0 victory for Feyenoord. That'll be a great opportunity for them to get another win on the board, cement their position in the playoff picture, and maybe push higher for a higher rank as things go. Next, we have Crvena Zvezda up against Barcelona. For Crvena Zvezda, I think it's going to be a tough going here. They've lost 3 of their matchups, and up against Barcelona, I don't think it's going to get any easier. There may be opportunities later on against young boys in Stuttgart to get some points on the board, but at the moment, that's basically as much as I've predicted. Here against Barcelona, I give Barcelona the edge. They have been reasonably solid, although they did lose to Monaco. That big win against Bayern Munich is solid, and winning against young boys is what we would expect. So I think Barcelona's going to get a big win here. I'm going to go for something like a 5-1 victory for Barcelona. I just think Crvena Zvezda does not have the quality enough to match up to Barcelona this time. So Barca with the 3 points. Next, we have Sparta Prague hosting Stade Brestois. Sparta Prague are already going to be a team that is going to be tough for them to get into the playoffs. However, if they could get 3 points in this game, that would give them 7 because they've got the win against Red Bull Salzburg and the draw against Stuttgart. And maybe if they could get a result with Feyenoord, that could push them even higher. But 7 points may get them into the playoff picture, into the Champions League. But Stade Brestois are pushing for the same thing. They already do have 7 points on the board, and that's from getting a draw against Bayer Leverkusen. They had solid wins against Red Star Belgrade and Sturm Graz, and so looking at Sparta Prague, I would give Stade Brestois the advantage here, especially how they went away from home to beat RB Salzburg. I think they could do that here against Sparta Prague. Now, this is probably then if Sparta Prague loses this game, I don't think they're going to have an opportunity to push themselves into the playoffs. But Brestois are trying to do the same thing. And despite Stade Brestois being kind of in the, I think it's the middle table or something, 11th or 13th in Ligue 1, they've been doing really well in the Champions League. So I'm going to keep that going. I mean, maybe there's going to be lots of goals in here. I'm going to go for like a 3-2 victory for Stade Brestois in this one. And finally, our last matchup is Stuttgart up against Atalanta. Atalanta, again, have had a bit of some struggles in Serie A. So far, they've gotten a couple decent draws, Celtic and Arsenal, and then got a win against Shaktar Donetsk. Stuttgart, on the other hand, they got a good win against Juventus, but lost to Real Madrid, drew against Sparta Prague, so they've been up and down. And so with them being up and down, Atalanta maybe not getting the same results. I'm curious to see how this will go. I think both of them would love to get 3 points out of this matchup, but I think it's going to be maybe a balanced game. I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw between Stuttgart and Atalanta. Maybe each team wants more from that, but I think that's probably right based on how each of them are playing thus far. And so there you have it. There is the entire predictions there. So if you want to put your own predictions down in the in the comments below, please do so. Otherwise, again, like and subscribe. I want to be doing these predictions throughout the Champions League season. So please follow along, and I will see you again soon. So bye for now.